Well, late today, the White House did release 100 pages of emails about those talking points and why and by whom edits were made. Senator Angus King of Maine is an independent senator who caucuses with the Democrats. He's a member of the Intelligence Committee. Chuck Todd is NBC's chief White House correspondent and political director, and Michael Isikoff is NBC's investigative reporter. I'd like all you gentlemen, when you answer my questions, to answer why it matters to the public, why it matters to the Republic. And then otherwise, why are we talking about it? Why is it important? Let me start with you, Senator King. Why do you think it's important that the president put out these documents tonight, these emails?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons you said, Chris, if you're not giving documents away, there's an assumption that you're hiding something. And, you know, I used to be a governor. I believe in executive privilege, but I think it's much better in a case like this just to get it out there and let people take a look at them. I suggested that on the air 2 or 3 days ago, and I've been through them. We can talk about them in some detail. I went through them about 6 weeks ago, and my conclusion was, what's all the fuss about? The thrust of the issue was, did the administration somehow manipulate the talking points to change from a terrorist attack to a spontaneous demonstration? As you go through these talking points, they start with a spontaneous demonstration. They did mention Al-Qaeda. Early on in the talking points, the General Counsel of the CIA says, let's be very careful, folks, because the FBI and the people doing the investigation don't want us talking about who we think might be responsible. And then later on, there's I believe, Chris, it's an anti-smoking gun. It's a memo on the 14th, which was the day before Susan Rice went on TV, from a guy named Matt Olson, who's a longtime anti-terrorism guy. He's the head of the National Anti-Terrorism Center, and he said, at this point, we're not aware of any actionable intelligence that this attack was planned or imminent. The intelligence community is combing through reporting from before and after to determine the full extent of who was involved. Now, I do think there's some evidence in here that the State Department was covering themselves because they'd had some warnings about possible problems along these lines, but it doesn't seem to implicate Hillary Clinton, and it certainly doesn't match the narrative that this was all somehow a political cover-up of what actually happened on those days. So, you know, I'm glad the White House released the reports. We're all going to pour through them. I've read them again. I read them, as I say, 6 or 8 weeks ago. My conclusion was, I don't think there's much there.
What's the building leadership mean to you when you're referring to the State Department? Why would somebody refer to the building leadership? What does that mean?
I honestly don't. I don't know what that means.
It's weird talk, and I'm always suspicious of weird talk.
Yeah, well, maybe it means Hillary Clinton, but I didn't see that she was copied on any of these documents.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for that explicitly.
Well, maybe that was purposeful. Yeah.
I think what you got here are talking points written by a committee, and you're always going to get a bad result.
Well, we've got news, by the way, along the lines of what you just said, Senator, and everyone else. The United States government officials say investigators have identified a person who played a central role in the attack on the United States consulate in Benghazi, and that the federal criminal charge against that person will soon be made public. The person to be named in this charge, or in these charges, not yet in U.S. custody, one official said. Let me go to Chuck Todd on this. Chuck, your overview of what we did tonight, what we watched tonight, the questions that answered, the questions that didn't.
Well, the big picture is that this was the Ides of May, I guess, today being May 15th. Beware of it. It's going to be known as Damage Control Wednesday for the White House. And the question is this the way that they were able to put this behind them? Benghazi, IRS, and the AP and the going after reporters' phone records, or is this going to be just the start of what is a long slog and battle that may get partisan back and forth with Republicans on Capitol Hill? But as for Benghazi, look, I think from 30,000 feet, this is a really ugly way of viewing how government works. The deputies are in charge. Note how late in the process that the head of the CIA is alerted of the talking points when they said, hey, we better let the director know what we've come up with. And, you know, this is the case at the White House. It was deputies. At CIA, it was deputies. At State, it was deputies. They're all doing all of the work. They're all putting this together, waiting for final sign-off. And I think one of the more intriguing emails that I think raises questions is Petraeus's reaction when he says, no mention of the cable to Cairo either. Frankly, I'd just as soon not use this. Then National Security Council's call to be sure. However, this is certainly not what Vice Chairman Ruppersberger was hoping to get for unclassified use. Regardless, thanks for the great work, speaking to his own CIA deputies. So that raises some question that obviously Petraeus thought more should be included, not less.
You know, Mike Isikoff, I'm just wondering, you know, we're going along this like a trail of crumbs. You're going through them right now. How do we know there weren't phone calls throughout this from Tom Donilon, from Secretary Clinton, talking to their deputies, giving them direction all through this?
Right.
Why do we keep sanitizing this business of government like it's only deputies? Why would anybody believe that?
Yeah.
The building leadership, these stupid terms
the
people use.
the short answer is we don't know, but it does look like a process that doesn't have anybody in charge, where everybody's concerned about the equities of others, and are we going to tick off somebody in another department? But look, a couple things, and I think Senator King had it right. There's no smoking gun here. There's nothing that shows clear political partisan motives. There is clearly that undertone of the State Department worried that the CIA warnings are going to come back to bite them, that they're going to get blamed. Why didn't we pay more attention to that? We've heard about the Victoria Nuland emails before. There's a revealing one from another official at State, David Adams, with Toria. The last bullet especially will read to members like we had been repeatedly warned. That's what they were worried about.
Let me go to Senator King on that. How do you deny, if you're an independent, which you are, that there's a suspicion here that when you have the Secretary of State or her people, in this case an appointee, Victoria Nuland, saying, well, we really don't want to mention the fact there were 6 earlier occurrences of terrorism that era. We really don't want to mention the name Ansar Sharia, because we don't really want to have any reference to the fact that there's terrorism in that neighborhood, active terrorism, and we weren't ready for it.
Well, there was, Chris, there is an email, but by the way, you can't justify some of that. I think it's clear that they were trying to cover themselves. The State Department was. I don't think there's any doubt. But early on, a guy named Steve Presson, who was the general counsel of the CIA, sent this memo to the whole group. He said, folks, I know there's a hurry to get this out, but we need to hold it long enough to ascertain whether providing it conflicts with express instructions from National Security Staff, Department of Justice, FBI, that in light of the criminal investigation, which we just heard some results of tonight, we are not to generate statements with assessments as to who did this, etc., even internally, not to mention for public release. So that's the CIA. That's not the State Department. They're saying we got to be careful saying who did this, because if we're going to prosecute later on. But, you know, again, I'm not going to defend the State Department. I think, you know, it's clear that they were trying to cover themselves and say, well, you know, we don't want the warnings. But again, to go back to the Chuck used the 30,000-foot term, as I understand this issue, the allegation has been that somehow the Obama campaign, the Obama White House, manipulated this to not say it was involved with terrorists. And if you read these emails, it's clear that they thought right up to that week that it was a spontaneous demonstration that evolved and in fact, I think they used that word, involved into the attack. And then there was the mortar attack later on. So it doesn't support the essence of the campaign. I don't think it covers the State Department with any glory, that's for sure.
Well, let me go to Chuck Todd for the last word. Chuck, the politics of this thing from the beginning, was it protecting the Secretary of State? Was it protecting Donilon? Was it protecting people? Because the one thing absent in all this discussion are names of principals.
Right.
They're not in this discussion. It's always deputies saying the building leadership, these weird references to their bosses. And I got to assume, going up to that Meet the Press day, when Susan Rice was getting her audition to be Secretary of State, there was an intense interest from the president on down and how good a job she did that day. And I thought she did a hell of a job as a political warrior.
Well, look, I think what we're learning here is that there was politics involved here, but this is agency politics, not campaign politics.
Yeah.
Because when you read through this, if it had just been the White House and the CIA writing these talking points, the more complete set of talking points would have made it. You saw early sign-offs there coming from the national security staff. It's when state weighed in. But you got to remember what I understand has been going on. Number one, there was an internal debate inside the CIA about whether it was spontaneous or video or related to that YouTube. There were some in Langley who thought it was YouTube related because they were seeing what was happening all over the Middle East versus what was taking place on the ground in Benghazi when the reports were there. And the other aspect to this about state, Chris, is that the State Department knows that that Benghazi facility is mostly a CIA facility. So
I know that's
that is another part of this. It's like, hey, they're fingering state, but let's remember it's the CIA with more resources. This is agency politics.
Great reporting, Chuck. We got to go, Senator King. Please come back as soon as you can.